He said, Tony, I'm quoting him. He said, Tony, I'm going to rape your wife. I'm going to rape all of your grandchildren. And he said, the next time you go out of town, I'm going to kill them. And what the F are you going to do about it? End quote. This has gone on for years now. Behind me are several witnesses who can attest to what was said. They have video. They have made numerous complaints to the police and the sheriff's department. Our church represents 27 nationalities. Every nationality that comes to this church comes for a safe place of refuge, a place of worship. Many recovering addicts who come for a place of worship. They are constantly stalked by these individuals across the street. They are constantly intimidated with threats of bodily harm. There's not a person that's come to this church that's standing behind me in this meeting today who hasn't been called the racial slurs of the N-word. Their children have been screamed and shouted with vulgarities. As a shepherd, I have not allowed the sheep to attack the wolves for what was said to them. I've given you a complete and true statement of what happened yesterday. I can't allow a man to rape my wife. I can't allow a man to rape my grandchildren. I will not allow a man to murder my children when I'm gone. The next time you leave, I'm going to kill your family. What the F are you going to do about it?
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Think and Reform podcast. My name is Luke Sain. Thank you so much for listening. Head over to futureofchristendom.org. We are just releasing the latest presentations we made at the one-day conference we had regarding Israel, and we talk about dispensationalism, Schofield, replacement theology, should we be blessing Israel, cursing Israel, that kind of thing. Great speakers. It was a great one-day conference, and really great content there. Go especially listen to John Bingham's presentation on C.I. Schofield. It is a very rewarding and entertaining listen on his presentation on Schofield. The Amazing Schofield and his book. So what you just heard was Pastor Tony Spell, and this is what most people have been talking about lately. Pastor Tony Spell's actions regarding the heckler who was ostensibly threatening to sexually assault, Pastor Tony Spell's family, grandchildren, wife, and to murder them as well. Pastor Tony Spell crossed the street and proceeded to beat the ever-living poop out of this guy. He did not do it. He did it effectively. He didn't do it efficiently, in my opinion. The effect was there, but you could tell Pastor Tony wasn't a very good fighter. He wasn't a boxer. Maybe in some bygone era he had received some training, but it didn't look like it, So just a word to the wise out there. If you plan on doing the same thing to a heckler who threatens to assault your family, take some boxing lessons. I think that will go a long way. So the Christian community is weighing in. This is in the entire Christian community's wheelhouse, something like this, a pastor attacking a heckler and winning decisively in front of the eyes of the internet. Just real quick, the eyes of the internet, all I see is everyone on his side. The only people who don't appear to be on his side are the Christian discernment bloggers. And we'll take a look at a couple of criticisms of Pastor Tony's actions. But first, I want to. This is kind of like an Ask a Theonomist episode. What do you do about hecklers? What do you do about threats? What does the Bible have to say about threats? Now, regarding this subject, I want to read a couple Bible verses, and we're going to go to Proverbs. And these Bible verses, I believe, by and large, for the Christian community, there is no place for them. You're going to hear Bible verses that the Christian community has no place to put them. They can't do anything with these Bible verses. There's no application at all. There's application in the individual Christian, right? We'll say, oh yeah, if that was me, I would have done the same thing. I think in the heat of the moment, I think many people would have hid behind, well, let's just love everyone or whatever. They would have hid behind some sort of abused Bible verse. Philippians 4:13 or something like that. But I'm going to read some Bible verses that one of them was my friend Matt shared, and I'm grateful he did. But in God's law, there's an application for like basically every Bible verse, right? But when you establish man-made law, you suddenly can't find yourself in a position where you're like, I don't know how to apply this verse, right? Because it's illegal to apply this verse, right? To apply the verse and in the way that Solomon's talking about this verse, if I was to do this, I would be put in jail or I would be sued and lose my house, right? That's statist man-made law. But God's law, the option there's an application for every verse. Everything that's talked about positively, you can apply it, right? In God's system. I'm not limiting it to just God's law there. The entire scriptures is like that, right? So let's start off with Proverbs 20:30. Proverbs. Let's go to Proverbs 20:30. Chapter 20, verse 30. Blows that wound cleanse away evil, strokes make clean the innermost parts. Now, there's no application for this in the Christian community. No, we don't know what to do with this, right? Because what people say is, well, the police should deal with this, right? But they don't even believe that the police should do anything physical. They believe they should arrest the person, talk to him, slowly put him in handcuffs, slowly put him in the car, take him downtown, and then release him with a fine, if that. And then he'll be back next week doing it again, what have you, right? Because you're allowed to make threats. You're allowed to make threats to a certain extent, right? You can really say horrible things and do very terrible things, but not cross a line that the state has put in place. But you can still do a lot of damage. Stalking being one of them. So blows that wound cleanse away evil, strokes make clean the innermost parts, right? So the Christian community, there's no application for this. They can't do anything with that verse. There's nothing like that, okay? They can't take this verse and use it for anything. This is a museum piece verse, right? This is a museum verse. Go, that's nice, old covenant stuff. Oh, well, I guess it's back to, loving everyone, right? So they don't know how to apply this verse. In God's law, there's an application for this verse. Let's continue on here. Proverbs 26:3. A whip for the horse, a bridle for the donkey, and a rod for the back of fools. Right? We're talking about we're talking about corporal punishment, chastisement. Okay? Chastisement that is done not just from father to son, right? From parent to child, but this is communal, this is magisterial, right? This is not just limited to parents disciplining their children, but we're talking about in society now. Here's also another one. By the mouth of a fool comes a rod for his back, but the lips of the wise will preserve them. Right? So, again, Proverbs 10:13, on the lips of him who has understanding, wisdom is found, but a rod is for the back of him who lacks sense. So there's corporal punishment that the Bible talks about for people who act in a certain way, who act foolishly, right? And there's no contradiction between loving your neighbor and beating the crap out of somebody who threatens to rape your wife. There's no contradiction there, There's none. There's no contradiction there, right? The concept of loving your enemy comes from the Old Testament, right? That's not a new rule by Jesus. And to teach someone a lesson is loving towards them. A friend of mine, or my cousin actually, made the case a long time ago, and I'm sure he's not the first one, but he's the first one I saw say it, was he said, the family is a mini society, right? The family is a picture of society before the child enters the society, right? The father teaches the children, father and mother teach the children about society before they enter it so that they can know what to expect, right? And there's corporal punishment in the household, right? If the child acts up, the child learns, hey, that if I am disrespectful, if I try to have my own way, if I try to fight my parents, I'm going to be taught a lesson, right? So that when they get out to society, they don't have to be taught a lesson by society. So a family oftentimes is a picture of society that's done in a controlled environment, right? Society is uncontrolled, by and large. There are many children who grow up and they get an unrealistic picture of society. They get a picture of society that's not equivalent to reality. In their home, the child's the boss. The child's a brat. The child gets his own way and develops an unrealistic expectation of how society is because he or she thinks, well, since my family's this way, society must be this way. And they get out in society and they have to learn a hard lesson, or through our status man-made law, their delusions are actually encouraged and promoted. And then the entire society becomes quite perverse because we keep kowtowing to the demands of delusional people. But some people, when they get out into society, they're awesome in their family, but when they get out into society, they realize that through the school of hard knocks that they cannot mouth off to people like they do their parents, and they find themselves getting into trouble, and they receive a certain amount of punishment for the actions that they do, right? Because they didn't learn in the family how to be respectful. They get out into society and they have to learn the hard way. There is a place for street justice in God's law. There's a place for it. Okay, so the question becomes to a theonomist: how do threats work in a theonomic society? This is how they work. Okay, young man threatens older man with rape and murder of his family. Older man confronts the younger man. The younger man gets the crap kicked out of him. The younger man says, hey, I was assaulted. And then he takes the older man to court and says, this man assaulted me unfairly. And the judge says to the older man, did you beat the crap out of this kid? And the man says, yes. And then the judge says, why did you beat him up? Because, in God's law, stripe for stripe, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, blow for blow, right? You know that, right? And the older man will say yes. And the judge says, well, okay, then why did you beat him up? And he says, well, because he threatened to rape my wife and family, and I have witnesses. And the judge turns to the younger man. Is this true? Did you threaten to rape his wife and children? And the younger man says, yes. And the judge says, case closed. That's how justice works in God's law, right? The innocent are perpetually put at an advantage in God's court system. Those who violate God's law, who don't love their neighbor, are always at a disadvantage. Street justice plays a part. There are many times when things get resolved before it makes it to the magistrate, right? People resolve things through honor systems, right? And those honor systems change from culture to culture. And a lot of times it'll get resolved before it makes it to the magistrate. So, yes, if you decide to mouth off to somebody and threaten to rape that person's family, and the man beats the crap out of you, there's no case against that man in God's system. There's no case against the man who taught you a lesson. Street justice has a place, right? Because we have these proverbs here teaching us that there is a place for a good pounding. There is a place. Yes, there's a place for it, right? And this place for it, it serves as a teaching tool to people who are disrespectful in society. That you can't just walk around making these threats. Now, a lot of people, since we're so statist, we view society through the First Amendment, right? Freedom of speech. We view society through First Amendment. I can say anything I want and I get protected from the magistrate. From the magistrate, yes, right, in our society. But you're not protected from your neighbor. See, in God's system, the magistrate doesn't go around looking for people who mouth off to punish them and beat them up or whatever. That's not the role of the magistrate. They sit at the city gates and they wait for people to bring cases to them. That's how it works. But in the meantime, God's system doesn't protect people who are disrespectful in the culture, in society. It doesn't protect you, right? You cannot appeal to God's law and say, God's law protects me for being disrespectful. God's law doesn't protect you. In our society, it does. The First Amendment does protect people who are disrespectful, right? It does. God's system doesn't, right? Again, the Bible verses I just read you, there is a place for physical chastisement that occurs in the culture and in society that teaches people who did not learn this stuff in their home, in their mini society. There is a place for it. And if God's law is the law of the land, and it's the only law of the land, it perpetually puts the righteous at an advantage. The righteous and the innocent are always at an advantage in the courtroom. They're always in the right. The wicked are always in the wrong, right? Now, obviously, things can go too far. You disrespected my mom, so I'm going to pull out a gun and shoot you, right? That's why we have judges to judge the case. They can tell when people go too far. They can tell when people didn't go far enough, right? So, the question of, well, what if he goes too far? Okay, then he goes too far. We all know when people go too far, right? That's why we have judges in the difficult cases. If it's not solved in the lower tiers, they go up further and further until we get to the top tier, and then we get an answer, right? So, in God's system, what Pastor Tony Spell did was completely legitimate. Completely. When you threaten to do the things that man threatened to do, God's system doesn't protect you. There's no protection for you. You forfeited protection from physical chastisement. You forfeited it. In our system, unfortunately, you haven't forfeited. You're still protected. You can say whatever you want to this guy, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Yeah. But you can be disrespectful. And if this guy comes out and beats you up, then the guy who beats you up is wrong, because as soon as you touch somebody with a finger, that's assault. Now, let's quickly go to my friend Matt sent me this. He showed me this video here. Let's see if I can find it. Uh-oh. Okay, here we go. He showed me this video. It's a very interesting video.
You know what this is? That's assault. That's assault. The touching is the battery. Posturing myself like this to you, that's assault. Why? Because do I look like I'm going to do you harm? Yes. Do you believe that I have the physical ability to do so?
Yes.
Okay. So it would be normal for her to be afraid. Yes. She's been assaulted at this point. The battery is the physical touch. That's why there's two charges, assault and battery. I'm gonna fuck you up. I'm gonna fuck you up. Did I assault you? I'm gonna fuck you up. I'm gonna fuck you up. Did I assault you? Do you see the difference? What is my intent? And then the threat of coming forward. You know what this is?
Okay, so thanks again, Matt, for that very enlightening and relevant video. So this guy, he looks like a martial arts teacher of some kind. He's explained to different people the difference between assault and battery, and what qualifies as assault. And he's saying that even physical threat, you haven't even put a place to finger on somebody yet. You're just threatening them. That's considered assault, I guess, from wherever he's from, whatever law, because it varies from state to state, country to country. But he's saying that there is a case to be made that even physically threatening somebody with an aggressive posture and aggressive words counts as assault. We are steeped in that thinking that the laws of men dictate what constitutes assault and battery, right? We go to them, and we look at these things and we judge by the laws of men what is acceptable behavior and what is not, rather than going to the law of God and saying, actually, no, there's a place for this. There's a place for this. The book of Proverbs clearly teaches that people who act foolishly will come to physical harm, and that is a good thing. That's a good thing. That people who act foolishly and disrespectfully will receive physical chastisement, either from the magistrate or from somebody on the street. They're going to get themselves into trouble. That's good. It's bad when fools are protected in their foolishness. That's what we're looking at here. With this guy's demonstrating that it's very foolish to look at this through the laws of men and let them decide what assault and battery is through fiat. So the law of God protects Pastor Spell. Now, let me just say this about Pastor Spell. I haven't really followed him. From what I understand, I think he got into trouble for not closing down his church. I've seen other people say he's a oneness Pentecostal guy. And again, I don't really trust oneness Pentecostal people. If it's true, he sounds like he might be a modalist. He seems to be, if it's true that he's engaged in this, he does appear to me to be a heretic. However, the law of God still protects him in this matter. If it was brought to a judge, the law of God protects him, right? The law of God does not protect fools. The law of God does protect people who are defending their families. And the law of God does protect people who teach other people a lesson who are being disrespectful, right? So, Pastor Spell, if it's true that he can prove in a court of law that this guy was threatening rape, right? And he's got witnesses. As a magistrate, I'm siding with Pastor Tony Spell. Now let's look at some responses. This is from Brian Gunter, June 24th. He says this: "It is understandable that Pastor Tony Spell would lose his cool on someone who seriously threatened his wife and children. I have no idea if those threats were actually made, but the behavior of the family across the street from the church seems consistent with such outrageous threats," right? With that said, it still doesn't justify crossing the highway to beat another man. Violence is only justified in order to protect someone innocent from imminent threat. We cannot beat people for making threats. This is vigilantism. Again, it's understandable how a man could lose his control and resort to that, but that still doesn't make it right. One important factor is how this was previously reported to law enforcement and whether or not law enforcement took it seriously and responded appropriately. We don't know the details on that, and the media should investigate this aspect of the story. We need to know if law enforcement is sufficiently protecting people from serious threats. If not, their failure needs to be exposed because addressing this sooner may have prevented the situation. Again, Pastor Spell's behavior is understandable, but that doesn't make it right. We would be tempted to do the same. We all would be tempted to do the same, but we have to think carefully before resorting to violence. If we celebrate this, then we are encouraging more people to assault others in this way, and we will get more of this as a result of celebrating it. We need to think carefully about how we respond to this entire story. There are circumstances in which violence is justified, but this doesn't qualify. If the 20-year-old approached Pastor Spell's wife and children, then responding with violence to protect them would be justified, but that doesn't seem to be at all what happened here. Okay, that's Brian Gunter. I don't know him. Totally disagree with this take. Completely disagree with this take, right? Brian Gunter with respect to him is not the arbiter of what's an imminent threat, right? It's not the imminent threat, an imminent threat. If someone says to you, I'm going to kill your family in 20 years on this day with this weapon, you're free to beat the crap out of that guy and say, if you come near my family, I'm going to beat you up again, right? Yes, you're completely free. There is a place for corporal punishment in God's law. There is. We're thinking about it like statists. We're like, well, you should be protected in all of your speech. Blah, 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 blah. Your speech is protected. I'm going to die for your right to say whatever what you say. Nobody believes that. Nobody does that. But, you know, with this paragraph here, with that said, this still doesn't justify crossing the highway to beat another man. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It absolutely does. Right? Think about it through the eyes of God's law. If I brought this to, don't judge a situation by the culture we're in, right? And I've seen several people kind of justify Pastor Spell by saying, well, the other guy threw the first punch, right? The young man did throw the first punch at Pastor Spell, so he's allowed to basically do whatever you want at that point. Even if the other guy didn't throw the first punch, I'm saying he's still justified. He crossed that line. He crossed when there's a line you cross with your words, and there's a line that you can cross with your words when you threaten a man and his family, that you've crossed the line. In God's system, in God's judicial system, whoever teaches you a lesson at that point is protected by God's law, right? You're not protected. You're not protected for threatening. God's law doesn't protect you when you go around threatening people's families, whether imminent or later, now or later. You know who's the judge of that? The person you threatened. They're the judge of that, right? All you have to do is, to prevent being beat up, is not threaten someone's family, right? You brought this upon yourself when you go around threatening people's families. Brian Gunter says this: violence is only justified in order to protect someone innocent from imminent threat. You're not the judge of that. You're not the one being threatened, Brian. His family's being threatened. You're not the judge of what an imminent threat is. So it doesn't have to. The threat doesn't have to be imminent. You can say, "I'm going to get your family next year, next week, whatever." But you forfeited your protection from God's law when you go around threatening people. You forfeited your protection from bodily harm. All bodily harm? No. But lex talionis is something that even the basic, this idea of street justice goes back to the idea of lex talionis, that the punishment fits the crime. And on the street, you kind of get a general understanding what that is. In the courtrooms and the high and lofty lawmaker legislatures, no, you don't. You're completely divorced from the realities of this kind of thing. But on the streets, you do get a picture of the punishment does fit the crime, right? In God's system, magistrates regulate this. When people feel like they've been wronged in a corporal punishment, they can bring it to a judge. But they have to prove that I was beat up too much for threatening this man's wife and family with rape. Now, I can't imagine such a case happening. There's nothing wrong with vigilantism. Nothing. What do you think Phineas did when he speared the Israelite man and the Moabite woman in the tabernacle? He didn't wait around for a court case. They didn't take him away in handcuffs. That was vigilantism. There's a lot of vigilantism in the Bible. Ehud killed Eglon, right? He didn't wait around for a trial. So, just saying, well, vigilantism is wrong. No, it's not. Under God's system, there is a place for it, right? And Romans 13 says, do not avenge yourself. Well, Pastor Spell was not avenging himself here. He wasn't. He was teaching this kid a lesson. that you can't go around threatening to rape people's wives. And you know what? Maybe if placing a finger on somebody wasn't battery in this culture, maybe that kid would have learned a lesson a long time ago, and this would have never happened. Again, this is assuming that the threats that were made were the threats that Pastor Spell said that were made. Let's go to a different one here. This is by, again, Brian Gunter, again, who's taken it upon himself to go against Pastor Spell here. He says this. This is the second post. So June 24th was his first post. Yesterday, say June 25th, I guess he did more research, and he's kind of doubling down on his position here. Before you defend the actions of Pastor Tony Spell, please consider the following facts. Pastor Spell claims his neighbor yelled threats of rape and murder as he was working on a bus on the church property. The bus lot of Life Tabernacle Church is over 300 feet away from the neighbor's property. Pastor Spell is claiming that he clearly heard threats of rape and murder from over a football field away through the traffic noise from a busy 4-lane highway. I live in this community and I drive this property all the time. A person can barely hear anything from across that highway, especially from such a long distance away. Okay. Again, Pastor Spell says there's witnesses behind me who heard it as well. It's not just Pastor Spell. So not really taking that into account is first point. First point's therefore kind of irrelevant. Number two, if the alleged threats of rape and murder were made, Pastor Spell's family was still not under any immediate threat since the neighbor was across the highway over a football field away from Pastor Spell's family members were apparently elsewhere at the time of the incident. And, okay, I'm going to jump in here right now and say, you've got no answer for stalkers. None. Stalker is not an immediate threat. Right? What do you do about stalkers? Just wait till they do something? Sit on your hands? That's why I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago about what do you do about stalkers. In God's law, if you feel someone is stalking, you're completely within your rights to go and physically assault that person. Let him take you before a judge and say, oh, I have a right to stalk. He didn't have the right to beat me up. I'm allowed to stalk. I'm protected under the First Amendment for stalking, blah, 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 blah. God's law doesn't protect threats. God's law doesn't protect stalking. But our system does. He continues, in order to claim that Pastor Spell was protecting his family, then one must assume that his preemptive violent attack made it less likely that the neighbor would retaliate instead of more likely that they would retaliate. Is it truly reasonable to claim that an extremely unstable and violent man is less likely to harm Pastor Spell's family after being attacked? Does violence usually calm people down or make them even angrier or more violent? And I'm just saying, is this guy on the streets? Is this guy on the streets? Has this guy ever spanked his kids? Does spanking your kids make them more violent? Is that what's coming next here? Don't ever spank your kids. Why? Because it makes them more violent. Violence just makes everything worse. Again, this guy's not factoring in a lot of verses in the Bible that talk positively about physical chastisement for foolish people. And again, then this is why I said in the beginning of the episode, people who read these Bible verses, there's no place for that bird to land. There's no branch for that bird to land in their mind. There's none. It just hovers around and then flies off because they don't know how to apply that verse. They look at it and go, I don't know. Blows that wound, cleanse away evil. Well, that sounds dumb. Let's move on. So it doesn't factor into their thinking. So when we come to a situation like this, there's no application for those verses. None. Number 3, Pastor Spell did not use violence to stop an imminent threat. At best, Pastor Spell is claiming that he used violence to stop an eventual threat. Such a threat is very serious and should be punished by law enforcement. But threats of future violence do not justify employing immediate violence preemptively. I would love to see how this... No, I would not love to see. I would not love to see that. I wonder what this guy would do if his wife and family were threatened with rape a year from now. A year from now, I'm going to rape your wife and family. No one's around. Can't prove he said it. What are you going to do? So again, they people are like, we've outsourced our responsibilities to the state. Only law enforcement's allowed to do anything, and they're not allowed to do anything, right? Brian here doesn't think that the police should show up and beat the crap out of the guy. He thinks the police should show up and give him a fine, a slap on the wrist, a big finger in their face. That's what he thinks should happen. He doesn't even want the police to physically assault this man. And behind closed doors, when you talk with men, and we're not in a church scenario, we're like, everyone's like, yeah, he did the right thing, and I would do the same thing too, if I wasn't so afraid. He says, such a threat is very serious and should be punished by law enforcement. Now that's rich. You're not living in the real world. I'm telling Brian, you're not living in the real world when you go around saying silly things like this. Yeah, call the police. Yeah, hello, police. A man threatened my family with rape, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, we'll send a unit down. And then the guy will just talk to everyone and say, sir, go home, whatever, stop this. Police aren't going to do anything about it. Number 4, Pastor Spell did not simply stop at punching the man repeatedly in the head while on top of the man. Pastor Spell also kicked the man in the face while the man was on the ground. Pastor Spell's attack goes far beyond self-defense and clearly was vengeful. It's not self-defense. This is not self-defense. He's defending his family. And he's teaching this man a lesson. This guy's out of touch with reality. This is not self-defense. He didn't cross the street because he was physically threatened. He crossed the street because his family was threatened. This guy's completely out of touch with reality. And this is why the Christians, we don't read the Bible and find application. We don't look for application for everything. We're like, I want to apply as much of this I can, right? This is what the Bible's for. It's about applying it, right? Let's apply it the way the Bible tells us to apply it. And this guy's living in some ivory tower where he just call the police and have them file a report. When your wife and children are being threatened, assuming that's true, that's what happened, the response was absolutely appropriate. He should have had 3 or 4 other guys with him. They should have held him back. And they should have said, if you do it again, you're going to be met with the same. Number 5, thus far, law enforcement has denied with documentation that Pastor Spell made repeated efforts of the neighbor's threats. Either Pastor Spell is lying or local law enforcement is lying. We need to know the truth of what was reported, to whom it was reported, and when it was reported. Pastor Spell's version of events is looking less and less credible as law enforcement provides evidence that his claims are untrue. Irrelevant to the discussion. Irrelevant to the discussion. Completely irrelevant. That whole point is irrelevant to the discussion. Number 6, according to media reports, the neighbor's cell phone video captured Pastor Spell saying, I'm going to break your neck immediately before the attack. This sounds like malice aforethought, not self-defense. It's not self-defense. It's not self-defense. He didn't cross the street to protect himself. He crossed the street to protect his family and to teach this guy a lesson. Oh no, he said, I'm going to break your neck. The other guy on the other side of the street is harassing the pastor, and all this guy, Brian, can say is, oh, he said, I'm going to break your neck. Oh, man, well, break out the excommunication letter, brother. Number 7, whatever we encourage as a society, we will get more of it. Yeah, teaching idiots not to go mouthing off at people. I want to encourage that. Do you, Brian? Do you want to encourage that? Or do you want to encourage more, write your local congressman at the amount of threats that are going on in my society? I'm not happy. Let's write our local congressman and do something about it. So that they can do something about it. But we'll pass a law saying you're not allowed to threaten anyone. And if you do, it's a $300 fine. He says, whatever we encourage as a society, we'll get more of it. We need to think carefully about whether or not this violence was truly justified, or else we will be encouraging violence for violence sake. That's what he thinks this was. It's violence for violence sake. A fool was taught a lesson, and this knucklehead Brian, with respect to him, I don't know him, but just as this is a foolish take. He thinks that teaching a fool lesson is a bad thing. Number 8, the standard of right and wrong is not what you or I would do in the same situation. We are sinners who are prone to sin. We may well have done the same thing in the same situation, but that doesn't make it right. The Bible determines what is right and wrong, not our emotions. Right, but he doesn't appeal to the scriptures in all this. None of this is an appeal to the scriptures. He doesn't use the Bible in either of these posts. None of them talk about what the Bible would have us do. And he's not going to Proverbs because Proverbs ain't helping his case. Right? Pastor Spell was not threatened himself. Pastor Spell's family was threatened, and he went over and he taught someone foolish a lesson that kid will never forget. And if you think that Pastor Spell was the only person that family was harassing, I think you're not living in the real world. Pastor Spell, assuming that the threats that were made were true, irrelevant to what the law enforcement was told or were they involved, Pastor Spell made the world a better place. He made the world a better place by beating the crap out of that kid. I don't care if he's, 20 years old or 40 years old. He taught that kid a lesson. Brian says, whatever we encourage as a society, we will get more of it. I encourage you, Pastor Spell, to do it again. And I encourage anyone who has their family threatened to respond with physical chastisement, with street justice. The Bible promotes street justice. So, in God's system, stalking, threats, the hands of the righteous are free to do something about it. And let the person who was beat up take the person who beat him up to the court and try and justify to the judge, hey, I'm allowed to threaten people, have nothing happen to me. I'm allowed to go saying anything I want, and nothing's allowed to happen to me from my neighbor. I'm allowed to do that. You need to punish this man. Let him try it with God's law as the law of the land. Not the general equity, God's law, actual law. The actual law of God as the law of the land. It doesn't protect you for making threats on raping people and their family. It doesn't. Not even close. So, appreciate what Pastor Spell did. Again, this is all assuming that that those were the threats that were made. I do think there is a place for some arguments. If the attacks are made on you as a pastor, the Bible, does talk about not avenging yourself. But this was not avenging himself. There are lines that are crossed. When Christ was struck, when Christ was struck by the magistrates, he didn't turn the other cheek. Struck by the Sanhedrin, he did not turn the other cheek that we know of. But instead challenged the person who struck him. Christ also got physically violent with people who were defiling his Father's house. So going back to number 7 here by Brian, whatever we encourage as a society, we'll get more of it. Do we want to encourage Christ for using physical chastisement? Do we want to encourage that? Right? Did Jesus just use violence for violence sake when he cleared out the temple? Well, he's allowed to do that because Jesus. Okay, then don't tell me to be like Jesus anymore. I don't want to hear another word from you about it. We got to be like Jesus. If you're going to be like, well, he's allowed to do that, but you're not. Then stop telling me to be like Jesus. Stop it. It's ridiculous. So definitely on Pastor Spell's side this time. I think the scriptures are clearly on his side. He would be protected in God's law for what he did. God's system does not protect people who make threats to rape other people. It doesn't protect stalking, none of that stuff. So Pastor Spell would have been protected in God's judicial system. Unfortunately, instead of being protected, since we have other laws, we have man-made laws, he's been arrested for battery, second-degree battery. So, well, that's all I have for you guys tonight. Thank you so much for listening to the Thinking Reform podcast. Head over to futureofchristendom.org for more content, debates, books, conferences, and announcements. And remember, my friends, think and reform.